All right, guys, I think we are live. I hope we're live. And today we are going to have I'd say maybe about half an hour live stream. And it's going to be focusing on MMA specifically. Just setting everything up here. And I thought this would be interesting to do. I have watched, or I've just finished watching, the MVP, Most Valuable Productions, from Jake Paul. And I was kind of shocked. Let me just check if the audio is good here. All right, so far it's looking good. Let me just fix the lighting. Oh, I think that's too bright, right? All right, let me put the lighting off. So that was a relight. Okay, nobody needs to see me in such clear high definition. So basically what happened, so for those of you that don't know, most of you probably know UFC. Now, yesterday there was like a special, I won't call it a one-off event. I'll call it a launching of the branding of MVP. MVP is Most Valuable Productions, and it belongs to Jake Paul. And basically what happened there was they called up a bunch of let me just call them ex UFC champs and competitors, and they had them face off against each other, which actually was very interesting. And I watched part of it live. I watched the first fight live. I didn't know there were prelims. I didn't see them on Netflix. When I was watching it, I watched Junior Dos Santos fight. So Junior Dos Santos ended up, hey Sassy Kitten, Junior Dos Santos ended up fighting, I think his name was Robilis. And Robilis is a brown belt, no, sorry, a bronze medalist in Taekwondo in the Olympics. And he went over to MMA. And that was the first fight. Now, I didn't expect much. I was watching it on Netflix and I thought, okay, Jake Paul has been doing very well in boxing, right? I know a lot of people hate him, but maybe that's why they tune in. They tune in to see him get, you know. So I was thinking to myself, okay, let's see what kind of show he can put on. He was able to get Francis Ngannou. Francis Ngannou is a free agent. That made perfect sense. I was surprised he got Ronda Rousey. And I was super surprised that he made the Mike Perry and Jake Paul fight happen. Super surprised, but super happy. That is the kind of fight that just makes sense on paper because those two guys are like two sides of the same coin. So here's my breakdown, my rundown, my review of what happened, what I thought about it. I woke up literally just like an hour and a half ago, watched the event while I was still in bed, and I have to say, so here's the thing. For anyone who knows MMA, there has been events like this in the past where other companies have tried to basically stick their chest out towards the UFC, and they mostly fail very dramatically. There was, for example, a while back, Tito Ortiz versus Chuck Liddell, and that fight was criticized because both men looked completely out of shape. Then you had when one was trying to go up against UFC with the pay per views and stuff like that. And Dana White says, do whatever you want, but don't try and overwrite us in the pay per views. We're here to stay, we're here to run the show. So a lot of people weren't kind of, ready to go for it, ready to stick their chests out. A lot of people knew kind of where they sit, and it was always underneath the UFC. However, what had happened yesterday was quite shocking. So first of all, Jake Paul, he has kind of mastered his craft in regards to business and promotion for the past 5, 6 years. I'd say the past 5, 6 years minimum. He has been out there doing boxing promotion mainly. And he's been in the fights. So he's been promoting the fights and he's been behind the curtains and he's very well known to take care of people that are taking part. For example, Tyler Woodley, when Tyler Woodley was to face Jake Paul like gifted him $100,000 watch, and then he rehired him to be part of the front desk. 안녕하세요. 만나서 반가워요. 요 샹라 푸푸. I hope I pronounced that correctly. My Korean might be off. 감사합니다. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Uh, Very much appreciate it. Um, so yeah, Jake Paul has been known to take care of like all his fighters and the people that like participating, and he rehires them later on. And there were like rumors of him wanting to rehire Mike Tyson just for Mike Tyson to show up to the promotional event that happened yesterday US time. So I was thinking to myself, okay, this could be interesting, right? It could be something. And it was better than what I expected. So I made a rundown. I've made a little pad rundown with all of my views, right? So I'm going to share them with you. So the very first thing that I thought was pretty good is they went another route. They were creative and they went like with another model. They didn't say to themselves, okay, we're going to go toe to toe with the UFC's pay per views. Instead, what they did was they teamed up with Netflix. And I thought that was pretty smart because Netflix paid them a bunch up front. And apparently, the way this was calculated was Netflix calculated how few people they were losing that month in subscriptions, how few people were putting themselves on pause, and how many people were coming out of their pause statuses to watch the event. I didn't know that that's how the business module worked. At first, I was like, dude, Netflix is doing bad if that is their core interest. If they're focused on how many people they're not losing, then that must be really bad for them right now, right? I thought so, but I didn't know that's a normal business module that a lot of streaming platforms use. So I was like, oh, okay, that's apparently how Spotify does it. I asked AI, it's a legit business module that you can follow up on if you ever want to like bring out your own platform, whether it be for gaming, music, education, or you know, entertainment like Netflix. So, ah, some mint. Mm. So they went crazy and paid a lot of money up front and made Jake Paul kind of like the face of the organization or the face of the whole promo. So the MVP promo thing is not actually like Jake Paul isn't running it in the background. He has someone else running it in the background, but he's kind of like the face. And what I hate to admit, and what a lot of Jake Paul haters will probably hate to admit, he is very, very focused on being legit, having a good reputation business wise, and he has a lot of trust. He's gained a lot of trust over the years from a lot of people, and it shows you, like if you watch the event yesterday, um, he said that he was willing to pay whatever it takes so that these people can take good care of themselves, and he wants to build upon that. And Also, if you see the people that were included, it was pretty awesome. They had everyone from like Big John McCarthy was there, um, who's obviously a referee. Herb Dean. They brought in John Jones. He was at the commentator's desk with Tyler Woodley. Tyler Woodley fought Jake Paul a couple of years back, and they had, I think, Travis Brown, like he's Ronda Rousey's husband. He was taking like photos with people, and then they had like a bunch of other people. Like Ariel Hawani was there. He was doing like the interviews. Stitch was there. Like he can't be missing anywhere. But they also brought some new fresh blood in. Like they had some. I thought they were going to bring in one of the Buffett brothers to do the announcements, but they brought in another announcer. He did a good job, and everything was built very well. The one thing that I think was sus was when I tuned in, there was hardly anybody watching. Um, and I'm talking about not the actual Netflix viewer count. I'm talking about the actual amount of people that were in the stadium. So this stadium apparently is in Inglewood, and it's a brand new stadium. And I would think that anybody who wants a good night out would want to be part of that because you get a lot of famous people that are just, um, walking about, so you could take like lots of selfies and stuff like that. I thought that would be a good night out for anyone. But I don't know if the entrance fee was expensive or people were just showing up super late because they only wanted to watch the last three matches or something like that. That's completely understandable. However, there weren't that many people inside the stadium for the first, I think, 40 minutes that I was watching. Not that it bothers me, but you have to remember Junior Dos Santos. He was fighting. I think he was number. No, he was on the main card. Where did I have him? He was fighting Robles, who's the Cuban who has the Taekwondo background. And he was the fight before Kenneth Cross and Salahdine Parnes. And then after they fought, it was Francis Ngannou fighting against Philipp. I think that was the order in which they fought. So Junior Dos Santos, man, I think if I remember correctly, he got his title taken off of him by Cain Velasquez. By the way, Cain Velasquez and John Jones were both in attendance. So everybody loves Cain Velasquez, obviously, if you've ever watched like, some videos regarding his private life. It was a very sad situation. I'm not going to get into that on this stream, but he handled it probably like most people would want to handle it. So Ken Velasquez is kind of like a hero, like the average guy's hero. So he was there as well, which was pretty cool. And he was actually uh, sending out lots of love and positive vibes towards his ex opponent, who is Junior Dos Santos. So up until Junior Dos Santos, the seats were pretty empty still. This is where it got interesting. So I didn't watch the prelims. I watched Junior Dos Santos as he was fighting against Robles. Junior Dos Santos getting in there. So this is my first review for the first fight. Junior Dos Santos getting into that fight. He looked like he was just so happy to be there. He didn't look focused at all. Like it was, he was just smiling the whole time. And I get that he was happy to have made a comeback after all these years, and it was great seeing him. But in all honesty, I think he should have just been focused on his opponent a little bit more. He got caught a couple of times. His opponent had like a very low guard because his opponent came from Taekwondo, so he had like good footwork to go in and out, like like karate guy or a fencer. So his guy definitely had a spring in his step, and I think that was just too much for Junior Dos Santos to cope with. Junior Dos Santos has always been very heavily boxing focused, and he's always been like, "Oh, I love my boxing," Brazilian accent, and that's okay, but at this point of his career, I think he should have evolved a little bit, but he wasn't like trying any takedowns. He wasn't trying to counteract the rhythm. And it's always easier said than done. And I guess if I was like boxing like 90% of my career, that's what I would have wanted to do. But, it's his choice. And unfortunately, he did get knocked out. So, spoiler alert, I'm going to be sharing with you the results of what happened. So, Junior got knocked out. I think he got knocked out in the first round. And this is actually going to be uh, in the prelims. This happened as well. A lot of people got knocked out within the first couple of minutes. So you can argue that a lot of people were coming in partially ready versus other people who were super ready, right? This is what it seems like from the outside, and to be honest, might be might be true. Nonetheless, I never saw Junior Dos Santos fight live, so it was pretty cool to see him fight live. That was the fight that I did see live. There was a second one that I saw live because it was like very late, and then I went to bed, and then I woke up and I watched the other fights. And Jake Paul MVP had Kenneth Cross versus Salahdine Parnes. Kenneth Cross with a wrestling base, and Salahdine apparently has knocked out, I think it was 7 opponents in his last 7 fights or something like that. So they went at it. Um, as someone who does wrestling, I thought it was pretty cool. There was a lot of good like wrestling reversals. Um, Cross did seem about a bit out of his depths when it came to anything outside of the wrestling. He was good at reversals. He got up and out of some nasty situations, but it was to only stand right back up again and get squared off and teed off by Salahdine. How do you pronounce his name again? Salahdine Parnes. Um, so as far as Salahdine Parnes is concerned, I wasn't familiar with him. I missed him. I don't know where he was fighting before this. Maybe I've seen him fight, but I just couldn't remember the name. I'm still having troubles remembering his name. Um, but he was teeing off. He was teeing off, and he seemed more rounded. And even as they were entering the octagon, they said fighting styles, or no, hexagon as they called it. They were showing the fighting styles, and Salahdine had MMA, whereas Cross had wrestling. And that is just too outdated for 2026. You can't do style versus MMA or style. I mean, you could do style versus style, but as soon as you come to face somebody who's just, started in actual MMA, so they probably understand the bases, but they're not classically coming from a certain style that they need to fall back on. They understand chaining everything together. Once you do that, they're just going to find the hole to slip into, and they'll be comfortable there. And if you've just got that one style, or you haven't learned to chain everything together, you're going to be lost. You're going to be lost. It isn't 2018 anymore. It's 2026. Everybody's like getting into MMA as their actual base, and then they're going to learn boxing and wrestling and like filling out the holes, but understanding how everything goes together is kind of like the base for a lot of people. And I don't know, Cross looked like he was just like a wrestler who got into MMA, and that doesn't work anymore in 2026. He ended up getting knocked out. I think it was the first round. Mm. I think it was the first round knockout. So there were two first round knockouts. Was it the first round? I think so. So now we come to the main events. Events, plural. And this, by the way, the first two fights were not bad. They were better than I expected, and the production quality was pretty ace. Like I was watching it and thinking to myself, "Whoa, Jake Paul hired the best cameraman, hired the best streaming services." The only technical issue they had was John Jones couldn't hear what his fellow announcers were saying. That was the only issue. That was the only thing that I saw had a bit of an issue. And sometimes there's awkward moments, as there usually is with these, I'd say, second grade. We'll call UFC the peak. But as far as second grade production companies go, sometimes you'll see some holes here and there in the production. So they'll speak with someone and then they'll go, "Oh, that's great," and then they'll just turn to the next person, and that person's still in frame, and that person's like, "Okay, what should I do now?" There was a couple of things like that. They could still work on those to like clean them up, clean those little holes up, and then they should be set for the races afterwards. Then it was Mike Perry versus Nate Diaz. So this was the main fight that I was interested in because I actually like Mike Perry. And it's so funny. Mike Perry is just so off mentally, and so is Nate Diaz. Mike Perry's like more proactively crazy, and Nate Diaz passively doesn't give a damn about anything. I think that's the best way to explain their characters. Um, but because they're so real and authentic in the way they are, they actually like each other. And in the post match interview, they were actually praising each other. They were like, "Yeah, let's do it one more time. Yeah, we'll beat each other up, for another million or two or whatever." And it was like no bad bloods. They weren't going at other's throats post fight. During the fight, I actually thought it was pretty entertaining. You could see they were both veterans. So first of all, Mike Perry was walking forward with his hands down, and he was just like, there were some lazy kicks at the bottom, and if they were landing or not, it did not change his intention. He just walks forward. And Tyler Woodley said this later on. Tyler Woodley says both these guys are actually in my weight category. He says, "Have you ever seen Mike Perry do a takedown?" He says, "Have you ever seen Mike Perry do up, down, below, up, and then go for the clincher?" No, he just goes straight in, walks in, clinches with the guy, and then boom, 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 boom. Right? It's very like brutal. Mike Perry fought against Michael Venom Page in bare knuckle boxing, and it was very, very brutal. Like Michael Venom Page is normally like quite stylistic. He jumps in and out, doesn't get hit much. His face looked battered afterwards. That's just the Mike Perry effect, right? You can't avoid looking battered when you go and fight Mike Perry. I think even if you go on a date with Mike Perry, that's how your face looks. I don't know. But anyway, he ended up winning the fight. And it was in the second round, the end of the second round. He hit Nate Diaz with a beautiful knee. It dropped Nate Diaz. And the only reason the fight wasn't stopped there was because the bell had rung. It was like 3 seconds into the end of the round. What happened next, however, was the cut men, the cut corner Stitch, who everyone knows from boxing and wrestling. Stitch is the guy who looks like Geraldo, who has the glasses and the mustache. He was so concerned about Nate Diaz. Nate Diaz's face was completely cut open, and on top of his head, he had some cuts that were open. And I think that was because he was on bottom a couple of times, and like Mike was just pounding into him. Um, Mike kept walking forward, and Nate did have some success with the jab. So Nate's got those big, long, lanky arms, and he was using that to kind of like keep Mike Perry at bay. I think it was for the second minute, third minute of the second round. And he was doing a good job. Like, it wasn't like he was doing a bad job or he was completely outclassed or anything like that. He was doing a good job. The thing was, he would then revert back to doing weird things like a half side clinch. And when they would do like the half side clinch, that's where Mike Perry shines. So anytime you try and clinch with Mike Perry, he's like, "Oh yeah, cool, violence." And then he was just hitting him with hooks and with whatever he could hit him with. So, my opinion, that was a shame. I think Nate could have done better. Nate tried kicking a couple of times, but he had to hold the fence to kick Mike Perry away. He's not much of a kicker in any case, but that kind of just showed me that he was a bit out of shape. I think Mike Perry came better prepared cardio wise. Nate Diaz is classically to be said to be like a natural freak of nature. The Diaz brothers have got, great boxing combos and good jabs, and they have great jiu-jitsu, and they have good conditioning. However, those things don't like those things are not natural gifts. You still have to work on them. And he was getting hit in the stomach a lot. Like Mike Perry was working his body, and when you're on the ground, normally the guy who's on the ground, the other guy is like hitting him. You'll see him kick the legs. You'll see him like aim for the face. But Mike Perry was also going for the body. And Mike Perry actually got caught a couple of times. I think Nate Diaz was trying to get an armbar in, and then I think he transitioned to a knee bar. But like I said earlier on, it's 2026. Mike Perry, even not being a jiu-jitsu guy, was like, okay, I'm going to get my knee underneath his hips, and then I'm going to be okay. There's not much he'll be able to do. So you don't want your like if this is the guy's legs, you don't want or sorry, you don't want your knee kind of dangling like this. You want to get it to here, and then you can safely pull it out, or you want to push your body in, and then that way you don't have a limb that's out there ready to be broken. And he comfortably counteracted that. Maybe 15 years ago that would have been a big deal, but most people like who've done a bit of jiu-jitsu will know how to safely get themselves out of there. The thing is, also, it's MMA, so even if he gets the leg, Mike Perry was working his face while he was holding on to his leg, and then he had to defend, and then Mike Perry just repostured and took the leg out. But it was a nice attempt. I have to say that Nate Diaz also hit him with a left, I think, in the first round. And he just had that Nate Diaz style, like putting his arms on his side and then walking away, just scratching his nose. Like it was entertaining, and there were some one or two good transitions. Um, a little bit of good boxing from Nate. Obviously, I'm a fan of Nate's, but I think he's just taken too much damage throughout his career. And I'm happy that he got a good payday, and I think it would be cool to have him as kind of a mascot for MVP. But at the end, he says he wants another fight. So, you know, I hope he takes enough time off, gets the cardio going, or if it's with MVP promotions, maybe they can say to them, hey, look, listen, that performance last time was good. We know you could do better. And we're willing to compensate you for it, but you need to be able to protect yourself better, and you need to be able to um, be in a better conditional state. Let's just put it that way. So that was that fight. What other fight was there? Oh yeah, there was Francis Ngannou against Philipp. So I thought I thought Philippe Lins was a natural heavyweight because he won the natural heavyweight, or he won the heavyweight Grand Prix PFL. I think that's before Francis had shown up. The thing is, he's apparently not a natural heavyweight, and you could see that because he was just so much smaller than Francis. He didn't look explosive at all. Francis came in looking professional, looking in shape, looking well prepared, taking it very seriously. And Francis, I think he only got hit 3, 4 times. Um, and it wasn't really doing much. Like his punches weren't doing much. The commentators, obviously, I think Kenny Florian was one of the commentators. They were like, trying to hype up Felipe. But I think this was a case of they couldn't find anyone else to fight Francis Ngannou. I seriously think that it's as simple as that. He was just overwhelming him. overpowering him when they would get into the clinch. Francis was doing whatever he wanted. And any time Felipe was to switch round in the clinch, so Francis pushed Felipe. There was a couple of punches, then Francis went in for the kill, and Felipe started holding on. Francis had him up against the fence, right? Francis Ngannou is like kind of pushing him in the fence. He's kind of looking for a good shot. And then Felipe was just like too slimy, wormy, shaky. I don't know what you call it. Crafty. And he got out and he pushed Francis up against the fence. And you could see in Francis' eyes, man, you could see it. Francis was like, okay, then I'll go against the fence and let me just reset and see what I can do, what damage I can do from here. You could see there was no sense of urgency in Francis Ngannou's face. He realized that the punches that Felipe was putting his way are manageable. He was careful and he just kind of recognized the strength difference, I think, first and foremost, and probably said to himself, yeah, yeah, we've got this. The question is, how do I want to finish this? That's kind of like, the how I would say how that fight, that's the main staple of that fight, or the identity of that fight, was Francis being in charge and saying, okay, let's go in this position. No, okay, we're going in this position. Okay, let me work a little bit on this position. It was like kind of like a light sparring pace wise, but heavy handed punch wise. And once he started connecting, there was a moment where he pushed Felipe up against the fence. And as he had him against the fence, Felipe, there was a headlock at the beginning, but then it was kind of like not a headlock, but like a neck control. He had the collar tie on, but it was kind of reversed. And then he was like just holding him. Like you technically, like you would your little brother, if your little brother was trying to punch you, you would just like hold the arm down and the punches are like this, and you're just laughing. And Francis was kind of like pushing him up against the fence. And then with his right, he was just squaring off to Felipe's body. And he got him with about 6 or 7 shots. None of the shots happened within a 3 second period. Like, no two shots happened within a 3 second period. It was like he'd square off, boom, hit him with one. Then he would like control him a little, boom, hit him with the next. Control him, boom, boom. Wait a little bit, see how his feet were postured, boom. That's like, and there's nothing Felipe could have done, or there was nothing that he was doing that made Francis do something else. So for me, he was outmatched, Felipe. I didn't even know he was a heavyweight. He fought what's his name? Oven St. Pluve, OSP, I think his name is. The guy who fought John Jones when John Jones was on when John Jones came off of steroids. That's an infamous fight. Oven Zimprea or something like that. I forget his name. An American fighter. They fought at heavyweight. I always thought they fought at lightweight. They just looked like chubby lightweights, but they were actually heavyweights. So I never really. And then he won the heavyweight Grand Prix. I never thought that he was a light heavyweight until I saw that fight. And then everyone said, oh no, that's where he's a heavyweight. But it was a fight afterwards where he looked heavier that he was fighting in light heavyweight. So I don't know if him going up and down in weight is the issue, that he looked a bit drained, but I don't know. I mean, he was in heavyweight, so he should look a lot. I mean, if you've got your diet right, you should look a bit more explosive, or if Francis was just that good at controlling distance and so on and so forth. Francis and Jake Paul talked about fighting in a boxing match. Afterwards, they were both in the ring, and Jake Paul, I've got to hand it to him. He was criticizing Francis Ngannou the past 2 3 days, and He said in the ring, standing in front of Francis, he says, "It's okay, I'll fight him." He says, "But at this moment in time, I'm his promoter. So we'll either see what we've got for him in MMA or we'll see what we can do boxing wise." And they don't, I don't think Francis likes Jake Paul. He says, "Oh, I think he's a child. Oh, well, he's became a man now." He was saying things like that. So he's not a big fan of him. But I mean, he did earn a couple of million off of him, and he has the right to express himself. And he has freedom of speech, freedom to plan the way things go. And he also says that it was very professional the way everything was set up. And I think if I was Francis, I'd be looking to do more business with Jake Paul, whether it be fighting him directly or staying with MVP for their next big launch, their next big announcement. And especially since Francis Ngannou had a great performance and he looked sharp, so did Mike Perry to some extent, but especially Francis Ngannou. He looked sharp. He looked tactically very good. He was throwing leg kicks. And I think the very first exchange of the fight was a leg kick. And you could see that that leg kick took Philippe right off the bat. It took him off his game and it was like a warning shot. And Philippe was like, "Oh, okay, I might have signed up for something I can't, go up against here." And the great thing about Felipe was he said Francis Ngannou said at the end, they didn't interview Felipe, but Francis Ngannou at the end said, "You're always a tough guy." I mean, yeah, he is, but there are levels to the toughness and durability, and Francis Ngannou needs to get a better opponent. It's as simple as that. So, this is where it got interesting. They introduced John Jones. And John Jones was like standing in the commentator's booth, like with his hands up. And then Francis Ngannou says, "I think John Jones has to find a way to get out of the cage." And basically, what he meant was he's still contractually obliged to be connected with the UFC and fight in the UFC. So he can't go to another promotion. Tyler Woodley, who was one of the commentator, he says to John, he says, "Well, now you have MVP backing you." And at first, John didn't understand what he meant by it. And then Tyler explained later on, he says, "Why do you need to get out of your contract? You've got MVP backing you." And then John was just like staring at him. And I was thinking, what's he talking about? And Tyler Woodley said, "You can have them deal with the legal process. You can send them, they'll pay for everything, they'll send their lawyers, they'll negotiate with Dana White, they'll make it happen." They did it with other fighters. Dana White didn't like it, but it happened. And Tyler Woodley was talking out of experience because I think before he fought Jake Paul the first time, or it could have been the second time, he was supposed to do something for the UFC and he couldn't get out of it. And then ultimately, Jake Paul's team dealt with it for him. So John Jones ended up saying, like on live TV, he was like, "That's actually very smart. That's a good idea. I didn't think of that." So I think he's actually excited about that. He just wants to leave the UFC. If he stays in the UFC, he'll have to either fight Pereira or Tom Aspinall or I don't know. Um, I don't know how things will look there. But I don't think Dana White will let John Jones off because John Jones is kind of carrying a lot of legacy. Everyone he beats, every single person he's beat so far, it's kind of like he's absorbed their souls and he's kind of like the one standing above all. So if he was to go to MVP and fight there and let's say lose against Francis Ngannou, then everyone's going to be like, "Oh wow, he just beat the whole UFC roster, light heavyweight and heavyweight," because that's how people associate these kind of things. Sometimes they think because it happened 10 years ago that I don't know he beat DC, that automatically means Francis and Ngannou could beat DC. Well, they fought against each other, and no, sorry, they didn't fight against each other. Stipe Miocic. Um, Stipe Miocic beat Francis Ngannou one time, and Francis Ngannou beat him one time. But now everybody's going to forget the time Stipe beat Francis Ngannou if Ngannou beats John Jones, because they're going to say, "Oh, look, blah blah blah. He beat the guy who you know, couldn't beat him," and then you're like, "But he beat him." So a lot of people forget things very fast when it comes to you know, MMA and the way things develop. It's like a lot of people forget Max Holloway and Conor McGregor fought, and you know, things like that always kind of surprise me and confuse me when people bring them up. But yeah, either way, uh, I don't think Dana White thinks that John Jones is a legacy fighter. He's not pure UFC homegrown, but he came into the UFC, I think, 15 years ago, 20 years ago, something like that. It's a long time ago. John Jones has been sitting at the top. I mean, John Jones was fighting the janitor. He fought the dragon. He fought, I think it was, what was his name? Patrick Vera. Patrick Vieira is the footballer. Patrick Vera. All those guys retired like, what, I don't know, 10 years ago. So, yeah. Francis Ngannou looked good, ultimately. He looked strong. He dominated the fight. He's not a bad light heavyweight from the research that I'd done, Philippe. Like I said, I thought he was a heavyweight because he won the heavyweight Grand Prix at PFL. People say, oh, well, that's less like a competition, really, because it's like a lower grade, but, you know, still impressive. He won, like, I think 5 fights in 1 year. In heavyweight, that's good. It doesn't always go that way. It's not like they can just rank up wins. You know, they get touched once, then that's them. If they get under their opponent one time, it's like hell for them. You have a guy who's 120 kilos. I know in our gym we've got a couple of guys that are over 110 plus kilos, and anytime they're on top of you, like, you're just basically going into survival mode. That's when you're like, okay, keep my arms close, keep my breathing steady, because it's just so hard to deal with someone who's 120 kilos. Sorry, 25 kilos more than you. Yeah, 25 kilos. So I'm 85. So if you have somebody who's 110, that makes a difference. And even if I was 100 kilos, I'd still be having issues with someone who's 130 kilos on top of me. And if we've got around the same technical base, I don't believe in people being technically equal. People say if all things are equal, then the weight is a factor. Never in the history of two humans fighting has everything been completely equal. Not their weight, reach, length, height, technique. Even if it's a double KO and it's the very first punch thrown of the match, when they have a rematch, it normally goes differently. So yeah, that is what I think of Francis Ngannou. He needed a better opponent, but it was a great way to start things off for the MVP. For MVP, it was a great way to start things off. Um, Show that he's in great shape. The whole world was watching. They were more interested than PFL, and he got a good payday. And I think he knows. I think he knows. It's important to know your value and get your money. So, last fight of the night: Ronda Rousey versus Gina Carano. I thought that fight would have lasted a little bit longer. Spoiler alert, the fight lasted, I think it was 15 seconds. And it was literally, I guess, 10 seconds into the fight I still didn't know that it was going to end in 5 seconds. That has to have been one of the fastest armbar submissions I've ever seen. Ronda Rousey did a double leg takedown to take Gina down, get in the position of an armbar, and then just do her thing. It was like watching a experienced black belt ragdoll a white belt in a jiu-jitsu tournament. You know, the white belt has learned one or two techniques, and then the white belt's like, okay, I'm going to maybe use this, and if this happens, this will. And then as soon as the black belt steps up, it's like all the technique is out the window. And I felt that that's what happened. I would have loved to have seen Gina fight a little bit more because she said that this was one of the best things that ever happened to her. Everything apart from the fight itself, she was still smiling, she was still happy. Both went home without any damage. It was basically a jiu-jitsu fight, a jiu-jitsu match or nogi submission match, whatever you want to call it. Both went home unscathed. That's nice. It would have been nice if it lasted a little bit longer. That would have been cool. And also, as far as what I could see and tell, um, Gina got into a good position to defend the armbar, but Ronda comes from a judo background and used to train grappling with Jean LaBelle. So, it's only a matter of time until the arm breaks. So it was really nice to see Ronda kind of take it easy and look at the ref as the ref was coming in, as far as what I caught. And yeah, here's we Zimba. He watched it with me. Didn't you? Mwah. Um, yeah, it was really really nice to see the two of them fight. I always thought that they did fight. I didn't know what the commotion was, but then I realized, oh, okay, they didn't fight. That fight was just 15 seconds, man. And Francis Ngannou, I think first round knockout. Mike Perry, second round knockout. Uh, Junior Dos Santos, first round knockout. Kenneth Cross, I think, was also first round. Let me check. Yeah, yeah. So to round it up, a lot of first round knockouts. I think a lot of the fights were kind of like lopsided. Gina did look healthy, amazing. She looked fit, she looked happy, and I'd love to see her included in MMA moving forward, especially MVP having like woman fight main events. It's good to have somebody like her on the desk. She did say that because she's 44 now, even though she looked like physically and she looked healthy and everything, but she says no, she might do one more round, but that's it. If she came back one more round, I would watch it, but they should give her a striker. Um, Ronda was more like no, she wants to have children. Good for her. And yeah, so ultimately they treated the women very nice. They had the main event that was female led. I thought that was pretty cool. It made it more diverse. Francis Ngannou, they really treated him like, the prince of the show. And everyone knew what was at stake. He was wearing a diamond necklace from a crypto investment company. That was a little bit sus. Francis, be more like wary on who you do business with because that might come back to bite you. That'll be an L you can never shake off. Um, if it's a Ponzi scheme, right? So we've all been there. And I think Philippi, now that they've done business with Philippi Lins, I've seen him fight like a full fight if he has an opponent that's kind of like on his level. He tends to want to bang, so you would have an entertaining fight if you re-invited him back. Now that they've done business with him, they've got his face out there. He could maybe go back down to light heavyweight, fight an opponent that's around evenly matched with him, and you would actually have a good fight for maybe the prelims, or maybe he could get on the main event card. Now that he's just raised his stock a little, even though technically you could argue he was Francis Ngannou's punching bag, but he did take a lot of punches from Francis Ngannou. So if he was to go back down to light heavyweight, I think we could have an entertaining fight or two with Philippe. He's very awkward style in my opinion, but Francis just like manhandled him. Kenneth Cross and Salahdine Parnes. Um, I don't know. Kenneth Cross is maybe a little bit outdated, and this is coming from someone who loves wrestling, especially catch wrestling. But I think he would need to change a lot if he was to come back. But Zaladina Parnes is ready for his next fight. He says, "Yeah, yeah, MVP, I'm here. Let's do it. When do we start?" So he was enthusiastic, and you want people, if you're running an organization like that, you want people that want to fight. You don't want people that don't show up to press conferences and pull out last minute. You don't want to pull out merchant, right? You want people who are like, yeah, let's do it. And yeah, Junior Dos Santos. Oh man, Robelis, I think it's called. The Cuban. They said it was the Cuban missile just landed. I was like, whoa, okay. Um, Fought a good fight, entertaining style. Fought against Junior Dos Santos, knowing that Junior Dos Santos is primarily a boxer. He was in and out with the punches, great footwork. I wouldn't mind seeing Robelis again. He looked like an entertaining matchup for most boxing heavy MMA fighters. So I wouldn't mind seeing him again. Junior Dos Santos, so sad to say this. I really like Junior Dos Santos, but I think he's kind of he was happy to be there. You could see he was smiling the whole time. Maybe he should just consider retiring, because once you've lost that explosiveness and once you don't show a craftsmanship, so when the explosiveness goes for whichever reason, you have to have a certain amount of craftsmanship that is left over, and he wasn't showing that. And I don't want to see, like, one of my heroes from 10 years ago or 15 years ago get knocked out like that. And they're fighting, I think that was a heavyweight fight, so they're fighting heavy guys, right? So, and then especially a taekwondo guy coming in, jumping, boom, hitting you. Scary having taekwondo footwork as a heavyweight, landing heavyweight style bombs, so one thing I forgot to mention, Mike Perry almost kicked Nate Diaz in the face, and both Nate Diaz and Mike Perry were laughing because he was behind Nick Diaz, and then he just raised his foot up, and then it was like Mike Perry was here, Nick Diaz is here, and then a foot came like that, and Nate Diaz was like, and Mike Perry was like, ha. Like, that was a funny moment. They were building on nostalgia. That's the main thing. That's the main point I took from it. They betted a lot on nostalgia, and the bet paid off, because everyone who they brought, who was like, former champ or fan favorite, performed well. I would say even Nate Diaz had his moments, and Mike Perry definitely had a lot of moments. Junior Dos Santos, a lot of people, he's just a fan favorite. A lot of people just loved seeing him. And even when he got knocked out, afterwards, he was like waving at the crowd, and it was a bad knockout. So he was waving at the crowd, and people just adored him. And then as they moved on, Francis Ngannou, I mean, he was just the prince of the show, the king of the show. And of course, if he's the king, then you would say Ronda was the queen. Um, a good mix up, a good mashup, a good mashup indeed. So I asked AI, what is the predictability? What is the predictability regarding the streams? AI suggests if you look at boxing, cross-reference it with MMA, base it on Netflix, and take a low estimate, you're at tens of millions of dollars. Which is pretty freaking cool. Tens of millions of dollars that is going to affect everything um, over the next couple of days. And then people, of course, are going to take stuff down, put it on YouTube Shorts, and then from YouTube Shorts, you're going to see like little increments, little shorts that will then say make you say, "Hey, wait a minute, I've got Netflix. Let me just switch Netflix on. I don't need to pay anything else for Netflix. I'm already paying a monthly subscription fee." So the lower estimate was tens of millions. Okay, tens of millions of streams, and with the revenue being up tens of millions of dollars regarding what Jake Paul has already earned, and then of course sponsorships and stuff like that. Not bad for a day's work, I have to say. They've probably put one or two UFC shows to shame because it just seemed a lot more respectful for the fighters. And whenever you ever saw a promoter say, "Yeah, I'll fight you, Francis Ngannou," you wouldn't see Dana White do that. But Jake Paul was like, "Yeah, sure, let's do it." And we all know he's crazy. I know he gets a lot of stick for a lot of things, but he does always show up. Um, so they were building on nostalgia. I think it paid off. Showing respect is kind of like the main thing that was missing for a lot of these fighters, and you could see that, like showing respect to the fighters. It was kind of like, oh, okay, there was something missing, and having that respect there, giving them the red carpet treatment because they're putting their bodies on the line. UFC tends to turn the narrative up and down depending on how they want it. 1 minute it's the safest sport in the world. And then if another like celebrity who's not related to MMA sees it and says, "Oh, it's human cockfighting," then they're like, "Oh no, it's the safest sport in the world," blah blah blah. And then when somebody says, "Ah, these are just like Neanderthals, they're hitting each other in a ring with a ref. It's just glorified boxing." Then he'll say, "No, these guys are much more dangerous than boxers, and they're much more intelligent than boxers." And then when you're like, "Oh, why are these intelligent people doing it?" "Oh, because it's the fighting instinct just comes up." They're always constantly changing the narrative. The problem is, I mean, you can do that. I understand it's business, and it's okay to be contradictive, and it's okay to be what's the word, manipulator, I guess. But it gets to a point where you are gaslighting your fighters to make them think that they're not worth more. And a lot of fighters are just trying to earn some money and get a bit of respect. And I think a lot of them don't feel respected. And I think MVP showing them the respect, putting out the red carpet, making sure they had everything, hiring people to take care of these people's luggage and hotel rooms and stuff like that, which UFC only does for like the higher ups. There's a lot of stories that have came out that people that are fighting on the prelims are like, I had to go and stay with a friend in New York when there was the New York blah 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 stuff like that. A lot of cracks that are beginning to show. Um, of course, somebody like Conor McGregor or Nick Diaz, they'll have everything bought and paid for them, right? But yeah, I think MVP put on a good first show. There's other shows to follow, but I think they put on a good first show. It was built on nostalgia, but they continued building from there on out. There were good performances, and even though I'm thinking that the live gate was a bit sus for the first fight, second fight, maybe like until Cross came in, I was watching Junior Dos Santos. The stadium didn't look full, so that was like a little bit of a worry for me. I didn't know where this was going to go, but then it looked a little bit fuller. But as soon as Ronda Rousey won, everyone left the building. So I don't know, like, if if even the people there were like 100% invested. I don't know what the atmosphere was like in that stadium, but I would have thought or imagined that anybody who was around that area would just pop up and buy a ticket and show up just for the fact that, you can see a lot of these stars get selfies with them, which happened after the fact. After the fights, the fighters were like going into the crowds and taking selfies with people. I don't know if they knew the people or not, but that's what it looked like to me. And I thought that was pretty cool. And also, I don't know how much a ticket cost, but it doesn't matter. Ultimately, they put on a good show, and I would like to watch the next MVP. I'm down to watch the next MVP. I just don't know if this is a popular or unpopular opinion, but I think they're giving UFC a run of the money or a run for their money because all of a sudden UFC kind of looks old and stale compared to what Dana White's been doing lately. He just looks like an angry businessman who's just force feeding ideas and contracts to people. I know that's probably not the way it is, but this just looked fresh, smooth, nice. It was not bad at all. So if I was to give it a 10 out of a 10, a rating out of 10, I would say 8. 8. We'll see how the White House card goes. I'm not going to watch that live. It's not on Netflix. So I'm going to wait until a day later and then I'm going to watch the fights and see what happens. Or I'll watch it on my friend's. Um, he has an account that he sometimes lends to me. All right, guys. So that was it. That was a big, long MMA rant. I thought it was interesting. I thought the business side of it was shocking to me. I learned a lot, and I learned if you are creative and you put something out there and it's just different, and it's just a lot of thought is put into it and it's polished, then you can give a giant a run for its money. So hopefully we'll see more of MVP in the future. Hopefully they keep respecting and taking good care of the fighters, and hopefully um, you know the fighters remain safe. Oh, last point. I noticed the referees were not walking about like zombies that are high. They were more integrated, and I think the referees were probably pulled aside and told, "Hey, we don't want one of those issues like with Jeff Hardy. I think was it Jeff Hardy? No, it's not Jeff Hardy. Sorry, his name's Hardy, but I forget his first name. Where he was shouting at the ref, stop the fight" during COVID. It's a famous moment in MMA, and basically, you know, everybody was worried that the other guy was getting injured. Here, the refs were really focused on everyone's health. So that's a summary for you. I hope that is interesting enough to make you guys go and check it out on Netflix. I'm not sponsored by them or anything like that. I'm just genuinely saying if you want, go and check it out. It was fun to watch, and I can recommend it. I'll give it a 7 or an 8 out of 10, and I'll see how it goes up against the White House the White House match. The White House match is going to have a lot of military people shout USA, USA, even though some of the fights don't include people from USA. But okay, anyway, long story short, it was cool. I liked it. Hope you check it out. And I'll see you in the next one.